This is Peggy. I had to join by phone because my Microsoft Teams wasn't loading.
Okay.
It's loading now, and it says it's waiting to let people know you're waiting. So I don't know if I'm showing up or if I should close my phone and then try to log in from the try to log in with video.
Yeah, I'm not seeing you in the waiting room. So maybe try again.
Would it not let me do it on my computer if I'm on the phone? Do I have to shut the phone off, do you think?
You shouldn't have to. You should be able to join with both.
Okay, I'll try again. Thanks.
Yep. All right, so for Northside, we'll go ahead and call roll. If you are here when I say your name, please say present or here or any preferred word to indicate you are here. And I will start with Georgiana.
I am here, and you want me to say my favorite food again?
Nope, we're just doing roll call, so just names. So.
Okay, roll call. Perfect. I am here.
Thank you. And did Vanessa? Oh, Vanessa, you're back on now. We're just doing roll call. Are you here?
Yes, I'm here.
Wonderful. Jim.
I'm here.
Thank you. Akia.
Akia here.
Thank you. Is Anita on? Don't see her. Anthony? Nope. Jackie? Here. Michelle?
Here.
Roxanne? Doesn't look like Roxanne is on. Lene? Lene? I can see her. I'll come back. Lars?
I am here.
Andrew?
I'm here.
Marquita?
Here.
Leslie?
Here.
Joanne? No Joanne. Michael? No Michael. Chavez? No Chavez. And Yolanda. Maybe no Yolanda yet. And then come back to Lene.
Here.
We've got baby announcing you as well. All right, perfect. Well, that is a quorum for Northside. For Southside, I'm seeing Samara, Cassie, and Viv, Karen, and Kosar. So we don't yet have quorum unless I am missing a couple folks. Vanessa, do you want to move forward with Northside adopting the agenda and the minutes from December?
Yes. First of all, has everybody seen the agenda? It's in the
Vanessa, I'll move the agenda.
I'll second.
Okay, it's been moved in second to move the agenda. With the exception of we're adding in the minutes, we'll move to number 3, and then the introductions will move to 4 so far. With that being said, Can I have a roll call vote?
I muted myself. Yes, I will call roll. When I call your name, just say yes if you approve the agenda or no if you don't. Georgiana?
Yes, but I thought that we were doing both the agenda and the minutes from December.
We can do that as one vote, yes. Would you like, does somebody want to make an amendment to the motion to do that?
I think Vanessa already did.
Oh, Vanessa, I think when you were amending the agenda to
Yes.
include.
Okay. Well, I'll make a motion to move that to adoption of the agenda plus the minutes from December 2020.
I'll second.
Great.
It has been motion and second. Can we have a roll call vote?
All right. So starting with, again, Georgiana.
Yes.
Vanessa.
Yes.
Jim. Oh, non-voting, sorry. Akia.
Yes.
Jackie.
Yes.
Sal. Michelle.
Oh, yes. Sorry.
Lene. I might have lost Lene again. Lars.
Yes.
Andrew.
Yes.
Marquita. Oh, non-voting, sorry. Leslie.
Yes.
And Lene.
Sorry, I was having problems. I'm here.
Okay. And do you approve the agenda and the meeting minutes from the December joint Green Zone meeting?
Yes.
Perfect. Did I miss anyone? All right, so that motion carries.
Okay, next is the discussion, which is ran by another member of the leadership team.
Yep. Leslie, are you ready to take over?
Yes. Hello again, everybody. I'm Leslie Jackson. I'm with the Northside Green Zone, and I'm excited to do the introduction about our air pollution, accumulative impact, and non-expiring permits. We will have a presentation on accumulative impacts by Cassandra Holmes of the Southside Green Zone, followed by non-expiring permits with a map introduction, and it's from Wendy Hanson and Julia Evans of the Northside Promise Zone. And we will follow with the discussion with questions that would be the planning for it and how we feel about the permits and any ideals we might want to contribute from the presentation. And everybody, please hold questions until the end because of time and people having to leave. We're just going to hopefully follow right one presentation after the other. And thank you for having me to be able to facilitate this. And Sandra, I'm going to introduce you as Sandra Holmes from Green Zone doing our first presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. And my name's Cassandra. Or Cassie.
Sorry, Cassie.
That's okay. I think we're gonna do is show a video of me presenting to the council, the city council. And I know it's really long, so I think Kelly is gonna cut it off like at certain parts, just to skip over and stuff like that.
Yep.
Right,
and then, yes, if you are not talking, please mute yourself. We're getting a little bit of feedback. So what I am going to try and do is, so I'm going to share my screen. And then I know that there is a way to, Peggy, I think the feedback might be on your end if you can mute your laptop or your computer. All right, so I'm just trying to figure out how to share the audio from this. I'm going to do a quick test. Let me know if you can hear the audio coming through.
I could not hear the audio.
I saw folks shaking their head. Let's see here. I swear there is an option to share audio.
I Googled it. If you need some backup.
Yeah, Jackie, go for it.
Okay, so you're sharing. Move your mouse to the top of your screen and a menu should appear. Select include system audio.
Yeah, I've seen that before, but it's not showing up.
Weird.
It doesn't have, because I'm looking under meeting options too, and device settings, and it's not showing up.
It's not a PowerPoint, is it?
No, it is a video. Well, sorry, folks. That kind of ruins the whole experience. Jackie, when you go into yours, can you see it?
Hold on, let me get back.
Yeah, otherwise, Devon's suggestion is what we're going to have to go with. Folks who are on their computers will be able to watch it independently.
I'm going to request control. Let's see if that does anything. I didn't get control.
In your options menu, does it show that for anyone else? Okay. It may be, here's this wild theory, it may be that the meeting invitation that I sent out was before Microsoft Teams added that functionality for the city. You'd think that it would catch up and like it wouldn't matter when you sent a meeting invitation. That's the only thing I could think of. Oh, okay. I'll try that again, Fox, see if that works. Nope, I'm not getting it. All right.
There's something that says turn on incoming video. Would that help or no?
No, that's like the camera video. All right, so
Okay.
instead, what we'll do is share the link. So here's the link to the video.
Do you want to just play it and like me and Karen can talk over that video? I don't have all my notes. I really don't remember, but that map is something Karen can talk to by heart. That map is really important.
We could definitely do it that way, and then folks could watch the video later. You want to do that? Okay.
Yes.
Is that okay with everybody? Otherwise, we can watch it individually.
Yes, and can you just email us the link and then that way we'll have it?
Yes, I will email the link afterwards. Again,
I was
apologies
hoping
everyone
remember-
for this.
I wish
So
I
I'll go
could
ahead.
remember what I said. Sorry.
All right, so I will, I'll go ahead and play, and then Cassandra and Karen, feel free to just ad lib.
So I really can't remember everything I'm talking about, but I know the most important thing is explaining the dire situation in the East Phillips neighborhood when it comes to the pollution and the city's plan and what they plan on doing in a what's called the Rough Depot site, which is on Hiawatha, between Hiawatha and Longfellow, between 28th and 26th. And one of the first things, and I'm telling them I'm not looking them in the eye, and I don't mean no disrespect, but it's because I have notes and I can ramble on and on and on. So to be respectful of everyone's time. So the map I'm showing, Karen, do you want to talk about it? You're probably on mute, Karen. Bless you. So the map is a map that Karen had put together when she was still in office. And I wish I can have everything in front of me, but I know that a lot of the data that came on this map comes from like the Minnesota Health Department, let's see, the Minnesota Department of Transportation. Karen?
Yeah, and also the City of Minneapolis Health Department and the Minnesota Hospital Association. And so I think those are the main sources. There was also a survey that we did door to door of people in East Phillips, but the documentation that's on this flip chart, the purpose of it is to show the concentration of toxic exposure from air pollution and all kinds of pollution really in the East Phillips neighborhood. And so we created this chart that the background is Hennepin County, shows all of Hennepin County, and then it focuses in on East Phillips neighborhood, or actually the whole Phillips neighborhood, but you'll see East Phillips particularly impacted. And what we show here, this is Hennepin County, and I think what we're showing here is the rate of poverty in low-income communities. And so the part you see down in the left-hand corner is the East Phillips part that then slides up. It's magnified up in the bigger map. And then the first thing that comes down, you can see all those little dots that are there. Those are dots that show arsenic exposure in the East Phillips neighborhood. This was a residential Superfund site for arsenic that came from an old pesticide plant. And every dot on there was a home that had our yards removed because of the toxic level of arsenic that came from that pesticide plant. It blew out of that like yard over there.
Sorry, like over 300 homes, right?
Almost 600.
Oh, wow.
This every dot here is added because of children who had experienced childhood lead poisoning to a degree where they needed to be treated. It wasn't just a small amount, they needed intervention. And so every dot there is added. Again, you can see that both Phillips neighborhood and the north side have the most dots of anything. The rest of Hennepin County is kind of blank. Okay, then I think this one is asthma. And this deals with asthma, again, a serious level of asthma that require either hospitalization or a visit to the emergency room. See how the dots have piled up here on the two sites, the Phillips neighborhood on the south side and the north side, just indicating again the concentration of environmental toxic exposure in our two communities, disproportionate to any place else in Hennepin County, or the whole state, really. I believe this is adding cardiovascular disease, Cassie, I think at this point, right? Heart disease.
I think it's heart disease, stroke. That one's stroke.
Okay. And you can see it's just adding up more and more and more dots that show people based on population. It's not just every individual, but it's by population. This is the final one that shows traffic. And we actually added that this year because we wanted to indicate that, again, traffic is one of the major sources of the toxic exposures that cause asthma. And you can see lines that run right through Phillips. And I think it's 100,000. The red line that goes through Phillips indicates 100,000 vehicle trips per day.
Per day, yep. And of course, there's a lot of little other ones that are, that's traffic. And I think one of them focuses on the diesel, right? The trucks that run on diesel.
I think that was the additional one that got put together with folks from East Phillips later. Yes, that's right.
All right.
And
So
the point is, excuse me.
No, go ahead.
I was just gonna say the point is, this is what environmental injustice looks like graphically. The two neighborhoods that are just deeply impacted. Cassie, why don't you say what you're saying there? Because you're talking about your own experience, I believe.
I honestly, I think I'm talking about how this is like a vicious cycle right here. How when it comes to asthma that you've talked to me so much about, and how our kids cannot go to school because of asthma. And then when they don't go to school, a lot of other things happen. And then we're talking about I'm talking about the Clark-Berglund law, the environmental justice law, and that's one of a kind. You want to talk about it real quickly, Karen?
Yes, it basically was what we passed in 2008 using this chart. We showed legislators that there is this disproportionate impact of toxic environmental exposure on our neighborhood, and we needed a law that said when some organization or business wants to locate in our neighborhood, they have to go through what's called a cumulative health impact analysis to understand what their pollution will do to the already existing burden of environmental exposures in our community. And it was the first law ever passed like that in the country, and it does, there's been a couple more that have been passed now, but it basically says you can't bring stuff into a low-income majority people of color and Native community without looking at what's already there causing environmental public health problems. You got to figure out what's allowed based on what's already the burden of the people who live there.
And that's a very strong law, state law. That's one of many things that was used for the community to win many things against other polluters. Do you want to fast forward a little bit? So this is just comes from a health impact assessment that was taken that wasn't actually released for many years until I think Karen found it, right, Karen?
Yep, we kind of poked around, and it actually, Kelly helped us get it through the Southside Green Zone, and we were eventually able to uncover it, I guess you'd say, and get it published for the first time in 2019, I think it was. And those names of those organizations on that previous slide were the 5 organizations that did the study, and they, you can recognize some of those. I think they all participated in putting together a document, like a 103-page document, summary of about 13 pages, and we used it to try to help the community, but especially the elected officials, understand what's going on, and they should be accountable to it. It made recommendations to reduce toxic exposure in our communities, in our neighborhood.
And I know I'm talking more about, I just don't have my notes. I'm so sorry, everyone. But I know moving forward, I did bring up a lot of those recommendations. Go ahead and play it, Kelly, because it might scroll through and show. But I did show the recommendations that were made by those organizations, and highlighted that they shared with city council members, right? I believe that they shared it with them.
That's right.
So you can, so that just talks about it, about the cumulative impacts. And this is their recommendations with the transportation pollution. There's reduced traffic, green investment, climate resiliency, and comprehensive air quality assessment. Of course, a lot of those were not taken into consideration with the project that the city's doing. Then we just show the Minneapolis Green Zones initiative with the city, the council members. I can't remember everything I said now. So
good job.
So I mean, we just talked about how the city council approved the green zones and everything. I would think that it represented and what they'd hoped for, and the fact that they were turning their backs on community members. And one of the things I say a lot about is, we're on our knees begging and saying we need, we even know what we want for ourselves. Just help us get there. Don't be in our way, basically. And I feel like, they're just like pretty much kicking us while we're down. They're not listening to us. The only time we're even considered somewhat human is when we're a nuisance. And so we talk more about the what the goals were of that study, of that survey. I'm just waiting to move on more. I think our things like kind of slow, huh?
Yeah, and then I think the rest of
So,
the
I just want to go
presentation
to
is
my
on Roof Depot.
Yep. Then we just show about the if you want to fast forward a little bit, we just show the community dream that we have together, the gift that we put together, and that would bring green jobs, green education, low income housing, just all kinds of good stuff for our community that would kind of help offset what we already have going on with all the pollution. So that we went from that whole 7-acre, which you see, I wish, Kelly, can you outline that? We wanted that whole thing, and then we went down to 3 acres, which is that what she's shown what the buildings are, and then it eventually went down to the 2 acres where she has her finger at that little space. And the community is just like, no, we're not going to keep compromising our life and our community, and like, why do we have to keep compromising? And people are dying, and it's not okay. So then I move on to, I'm waiting for it to keep moving. We can fast forward a little bit. I'm getting into a lot of feelings because I'm talking about my son who passed away. He was 16 and he passed away from a heart condition that he was not born with. Looking around after my son passed away, there's a lot of youth who've passed away from heart conditions. We lost some youth to asthma, and a lot of these youth that were passing away from heart conditions, they were not born with these heart conditions, but were diagnosed later on in their life. Mine at 14, my best friend's daughter at 21, another young girl at 23, and another community member's son at 40, in his 40s. So I wanted them to see the real, I put a face to how this is affecting us. And so I show them a picture of my son after his one of his many heart surgeries, and a picture of him just so they could see us as humans and not just a nuisance in their side, but that we're fighting for to live, for our right to live. We're fighting for our children. We're fighting for our future. And this is not a joke. This is not about money or space. This is about our lives. So this is what you'll be seeing moving forward. That's my son. And I don't know if you passed the picture, and I don't know, but his memorial's coming up. His 8-year memorial's coming up on the 17th. And so that's the presentation.
Thank you, Cassie.
Yeah, thank you for sharing all of that again. And sorry that the audio didn't work. You did a great job in a very impromptu, because it's kind of throwing you right at it. So thank you very much.
Yes, Cassie, thank you. And we're so sorry for your loss.
Thank you.
So
Moving
Leslie,
along.
yeah, go ahead.
Moving along, we're going to breathe and then go to the non-expiring permits. Wendy and Julia will be doing that presentation. Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to share my screen. Okay, Julia, are you ready?
I'm ready.
Okay.
All right, so Wendy and I are going to give you a little overview of the work that's been done on non-expiring air emission permits. If you go to the first slide, Wendy, I'm just going to give you some background, and then Wendy will take it away with the maps that she has made. So first of all, just so that everyone's on sort of the same page and has the same knowledge, what are non-expiring air emission permits? So essentially every facility that's going to put air pollutants into the air in Minnesota has to be permitted by the state. And depending on the permit that the state gives them, some of the facilities have permits that have to be reviewed and reapproved or reissued after a set amount of time. So a common amount of time is 5 years. Every 5 years, some facilities have to be, their permits have to be reissued. But some facilities have non-expiring permits. So essentially, once that permit, once that permit is approved, it doesn't need to be reviewed again. And it's my understanding that even if air pollution standards change, the facility only has to follow whatever was put in its permit. So there are approximately 115 facilities right now in Minnesota with non-expiring air emission permits. Some examples that you probably have heard of, GAF, their permit was issued in 2001, and Northern Metals has been permitted since 1995. And these facilities, again, their permits since being issued haven't had to be reviewed. So essentially whatever they were initially allowed to sort of pollute, they are still allowed to put those pollutants into the air. So one thing that's important to note is that Congressman Lee in District 59A has been introducing state legislation that would require these facilities with these non-expiring permits to basically hold a public hearing every 5 years. And so at that hearing, community members could make comments or ask questions to the facility and to the MPCA about essentially whatever they want, air quality testing or facilities operations or how compliant they are with their permit, stuff like that. Currently, this bill has been heard by committee and essentially laid over for possible inclusion into an omnibus bill. So basically collecting it with a number of other environmental sort of related bills into one big bill. And as far as I know, that has not really gone any farther than that. So Wendy, take it away.
Can you mute? I'm so sorry. I had to come out of there to get my microphone back on. All right, so here we go.
Can one of the admins please mute the people who aren't speaking? Thank you.
All right, so with the maps, what I was hoping to show is that these facilities tend to be located in areas with fewer resources, more poverty or stress. I looked at several variables and I kind of had poor luck at the beginning when looking at things like areas with a high poverty, a high percentages of people of color or immigrants. And then I looked at it using the CDC Social Vulnerability Index, and then it's pretty clear. So I'll tell you what that is real quick. The CDC Social Vulnerability Index is It's a variable. It's based on census data that's updated every couple of years. In this case, I used 2018 data. That was the most recent. And it includes 15 different variables found on the census. So in variables that are related to socioeconomic status, race, ethnicity, language, household composition, and housing and transportation. And the variable that I chose, you could choose any of these 4, but the one I chose actually combines all 4. And this combination variable, the CDC takes all the census tracts in Minnesota, of which there are 1,300 or 1,400 of them, and it ranks them all. So each one is in a position of greater or lesser social vulnerability, you know, from number 1 with the most social vulnerability all the way to number 1,350, whatever, with the least amount of social vulnerability. So they're all ranked. They all have their own place in the ranking, each census tract. And so what I did is I divided that whole list into thirds. I divided the list into thirds or tertiles for analysis. So basically I took the top third that had the most social vulnerability, and I called those the highest category with highest levels of social vulnerability. The ones with the least social vulnerability were the bottom third, and then in between, those were the intermediate social vulnerability tracks, and you'll see that on the map. And so for the state level map, like I said, I used all of the census tracts in the state. With the Twin Cities area map, I used only the census tracts in the 7-county Twin Cities area, and I ranked those and again divided those into thirds so that each third of each of these maps will contain the same number of census tracts. So it is possible, because the Twin Cities area, you know, it doesn't encompass all of the tracts. It's only the ones in the area, that a tract that might have been at one level in the state winds up, when we are only looking at the Twin Cities, it might have changed levels. For the most part, they didn't, but I just wanted to make sure that we were comparing Twin Cities to Twin Cities and state to the overall state. And then Julia, she geocoded all of the stationary facilities with non-expiring permits, 108. And I think you heard Julia say that there are a few more facilities with non-expiring permits. However, we didn't use a few of them because they are not stationary. So they're facilities that are used like when they're on road work and that kind of thing, and they travel all over the state, so there wasn't really any way to put them in a specific place. Unfortunately, they're polluting all over the place, but they're not polluting in one specific place, so we only map the stationary facilities. Okay, so here is the Minnesota map, and again, you can see that the areas in red are the census tracts that are the most vulnerable. You can't see all of the lines in between census tracts. For instance, if there's several census tracts that are red and right next to each other, it's difficult to see the lines in between them, especially with the yellow ones. So it's more like areas. So you can kind of think of the red as the areas that are the most vulnerable or have the least resources. Orange areas are intermediate, and yellow areas are the least vulnerable. And I know it's difficult to see on this map, but overall, if you can kind of, we'll look again at the Twin Cities in a minute, but you can kind of see even out here in these rural areas that a lot of these facilities are showing up in the orange and red areas. So we counted up the facilities in each of the areas, and we found there were 19 in the least vulnerable, or the yellow census tracts. 48 in the intermediate, and 37 facilities in the most vulnerable census tracts. So you can see it's actually, as far as the state goes, there's the most facilities are kind of in those middle areas, or the areas with intermediate levels of resources. And in fact, areas with intermediate social vulnerability had 2.5 times as many facilities as areas with lowest social vulnerability. And areas with highest social vulnerability, or the red areas, had 2 times as many facilities as areas with lowest social vulnerability. And so, you know, that does show that these facilities with non-expiring permits tend to be located in areas where people are already experiencing stress, health disparities. Here's the Twin Cities map. And it's probably not surprising to most of you that most of the facilities in the Twin Cities are located right here in Minneapolis. And again, you know, we don't see a lot of these facilities sitting out in the suburbs. And so they're located in areas where people are already dealing with all kinds of other pollution from cars and what have you. So again, talking about, you know, as they did in the last presentation about just kind of building these health concerns one on top of another. So I'll show you the numbers from this. The numbers weren't quite as striking when we look at the Twin Cities area. 12 in the least vulnerable, 14 in intermediate census tracts, and 17 in the most vulnerable. So we do see it going up with vulnerability. So areas with the intermediate social vulnerability had 1.17 times as many facilities as areas with lowest social vulnerability, or orange versus yellow. And areas with the highest social vulnerability, the red areas, had 1.42, so nearly 1.5 times as many facilities as areas with the lowest social vulnerability. All right, so a few points I wanted to make about these maps is they definitely don't tell the whole story. And in fact, the story is probably worse than what they show. I'm going to go back to the map to make these points. So the facilities are often clustered. And again, so people who tend to be living near GIF are also living near Northern Metals. So sorry about that. So, you know, people are in certain areas of the city or of the Twin Cities area are having multiple sources of pollution directed at them. Another point to make is that tracts with higher social vulnerability tend to be tracts located in higher density areas. So all census tracts have approximately the same number of people in them. But obviously we know that in rural areas, there are less people per area, that people live in a more spread out lifestyle. So even though there's actually more area out in the yellow spots, we still see these facilities being placed in areas with the highest social vulnerability, being placed right next to each other, and in areas where people are already dealing with health deteriorating conditions. Another thing I noticed is that the facilities that are in the least vulnerable areas, they tend to, oftentimes they're bordering these areas of high vulnerability. So I guess this is in, you know, what's probably a rather large yellow census tract, but as you can see, it's right here. Actually, both of these they're right here next to this area of higher social vulnerability. And as we know, air pollution doesn't really respect census tract boundaries. These folks over here, even though it wasn't counted in their area, they're certainly going to experience ill health effects. Another thing I wanted to point out is we've got this empty tract over here. That's the area in St. Paul around Pig's Eye Lake. And it didn't have any people counted in terms of a population. And so it didn't have a social vulnerability attached to it. So it's just gray. I didn't count those areas as being, those facilities as being in any area. But you can see, I mean, technically they're not in any census tract with people living in it, but who are they closest to, right? They're closest to areas in St. Paul that have high social vulnerability. And finally, I just wanted to point out that there are 10 of these facilities with non-expiring permits in the Minneapolis area, and 7 of them are in areas that are most socially vulnerable. So anyway, that's all I have, and thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you both for both presentations. Now we're open for discussion as a group. And the question would be, what plan of action for the green zones for the non-expiring permits or the community impacts that to analyze? And any thoughts or anything like that that we can contribute, and what we as the zones can do to make changes in our community about what's going on.
I have a couple of questions, and were we going to break out into smaller groups to start some of these questions, or were we going to discuss here first?
For this section,
I believe the plan is okay.
Yeah, go ahead, Leslie.
Well, I thought the plan was the discussion for everybody in the group, and then the breakout groups were for a different discussion. But it depends on how you guys want to do this, but that's what I thought as a whole, that we were going to discuss it.
Okay. Looks, Jackie has her hand up first. Yep.
Oh. Yeah, I just had some questions for Wendy and Julia. Does a non-expiring permit mean that their emissions aren't monitored at all, or does it just mean that they just only have to live up to the standards of when their permit was expired, but they're still monitored?
I think that they are still monitored, and I think Fox is on this call, and he probably could speak to this better than I can, but I believe they're still monitored, and it looks like even sometimes the permits are changed a bit, but I think for the most part they just have to adhere to the standards that were set in their initial permit.
Interesting. So I wonder if the map would change if you looked at date that the permit was issued, to see if the older permits all exist in certain areas or whatever. That was all my questions. You guys can take it away from here.
Fox, are you on the call? Could you?
I am.
Could you speak a little bit about the non-expiring permits and how that works?
Sure. So the way that the state does non-expiring permits is basically they issue a facility a permit and they say you can do what's in this permit. If you don't change any of the things you're doing, you don't have to change your permit. So that's kind of the oversimplification. That does not mean that, you know, if the law were to change, they would still be subject to the new regulation and not necessarily what's in a permit. But yeah, Wendy pretty much got it right. Yeah.
Thank you. Karen, I see you have
Andrew?
Yeah, okay. Yeah,
Go
thank
ahead,
you.
Karen.
I just want to thank you for that map and to say a couple things. One is, yeah, if there's no, once that non-expiring permit is given, it's not necessarily ever going to change unless there is a change in the law. And so I'd like to just start by saying all of these things are subject to law changes, ordinances at the city level or the county level or at the state level. And so, so for example, Fooley's law to try to include cumulative impact, and actually his law also has the 5-year look back. That law will change those non-expiring permits requirements. So I think it's just important to know that all of the things that are limitations here can be changed because they're made by human beings who are elected to offices, and we should always keep that in mind. And in terms of action, one thing we can do, I think, is really support Fooley's bill and make sure that it actually, gets passed. I also like to say that I think the original statement that said all polluting facilities must be permitted. That's actually not correct. I wish it were. One of the major polluting facilities that are not ever permitted, because again, the law hasn't changed yet, and that has to do with air pollution caused by traffic. Traffic and the roads that are go crisscross some of our vulnerable communities where the social vulnerability is really high, and where we documented, for example, in South Minneapolis, all the impact, particularly on asthma and cardiovascular disease and so on, related to traffic. You know, those roads are a facility, and the cars that are on them are facilities. And there are some ways that we could figure out how to require cleaner, there have been some states, cleaner cars, you know, so that we're not dumping all this toxic pollution into those neighborhoods. So I just want to say right now there are major gaps in permits, in addition to those that get the 5-year exemption in terms of anything. And I can just tell you, in East Phillips neighborhood, we have 2 major industries whose permits are 20 years old. One is called Smith Foundry and the other one is called Bituminous Roadways. Actually, they're more than 20 years old. We've been trying for the last 4 or 5 years to get them, get their permits up to date. And we have this law that says you have to look at the existing burden already on the population, and we still have not had a new permit required for those 2 facilities. So enforcement is just the second thing I want to say. You can, first of all, you have to change the law, and then secondly, you have to have agencies enforce the law. So I just wanted to add that to our action items, I guess.
Thank you, Karen. What I was curious about in regards to changing those laws, what was the basis for starting a non-expiring permit? I mean, is there something we can point to for why that was ever created, or what basis that was created under? And that's something that we could maybe look to make a change, or just curious if there's information around that for kind of starting things off.
I can personally say I don't know the answer to that. Maybe MPCA folks do.
Curious, yeah, if that's something maybe we look into. But the other piece of that was really interesting when you pulled up the statewide map. It sounds like we're hitting some roadblocks as far as Mr. Lee's proposal getting, I guess, more support. But looking at that broader map, it looks like it's not just a metro issue. And curious if there's organizations we're aware of that are outside of the metro area that can build a stronger coalition for something. I can provide email here afterwards if there's some follow-up we want to do, but I think that's maybe a route that can get us more traction, is looking at the broader state than just outside of Minneapolis proper.
Yeah, Andrew, that's a really good point. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I don't know, Fox, if you have an answer to Andrew's question about the origins of the non-expiring permit. Otherwise, we can go to, there's a couple other hands up.
Sure, I'll just address it real quick. The shortest and most succinct answer is that it's a resource issue for the state because of the number of permits that we issue. It's easier if we don't. I am not speaking as myself. This is not about, but as an MPCA person, it is quote unquote easier to issue a permit once and make the burden on the facility to say if they're going to make any changes, and then they tell us. So in a lot of regards, it's the bottom line of just the resource issues.
Really quick follow-up to that. I mean, is there any information that we could get as far as what a general, permit would cost, just hypothetically, and obviously not getting down to dollars and cents, but just, if there's a fundraising type thing that can be had, or some type of resource that we can start looking towards to say, if it's a problem on funding, let's address that directly. I think we all saw that, but just if you have any, I can follow up with you directly too to try and get some of that information put together, but interested in what that would maybe cost.
Yeah, and Kelly, if you want to connect us, that would be great. I'd be happy to look into that a little bit more and give you a better researched answer.
Yep, I can definitely do that. It looks like Devon and then Leslie and then Karen.
Did you say my name, Kelly?
Yes, go ahead.
There's a big storm happening, so I couldn't hear. First of all, I want to thank you all for your leadership on this. I am so inspired by the thought leaders here and the critical questions. A lot of what I wanted to ask has been asked, and it was more about what actions can we take. And I'm saying we, as a community member, I do not formally serve on either of the green zones, but I do serve on the Environmental Justice Coordinating Council, and really looking at, environmental justice broadly, right? Not just climate change, not just the pollutants, but done a lot of work around infant mortality and asthma and lead and all those things that we know are part of our lived reality every day. And so I'm curious if there is a target, right? Like Karen Clark gave us some examples of actions that can be taken with changing the law and then enforcement of those changes in the law. But I imagine that there is some resistance somewhere that has stopped this from happening along the way. And if we know where that resistance lies, oftentimes it's not just political, it's economic. And so, are we as a combined group really thinking about strategy? Are there targets? And I will speak very candidly as a resident here. I would like to see JF go away. Like, can we get them out of here? What does it take? Like, that is a campaign I believe just about every community member could probably get behind. So just curious about how this group is thinking about next steps. And thanks so much for all your hard work.
Thanks, Devon. I think Leslie's next.
I have a question. And I'm glad that we had this discussion today and the presenters did their thing. Thank you very much. My question is about these non-expiring permits and the map. Now, with the maps, can I get exact locations where these areas are? And are there air permits over there? Because I'm seriously thinking about putting air permits, continuing the work that I was doing and so interruptly rooted stopped because of things that happened, but putting back air permits. And can we as the green zone start placing them and mapping where they might be needed? And I'm interested in doing that type of work. And I know the pollution control has monitors in several different locations, but they're trying to get over North Minneapolis and place them. And I really want to start doing that project again. But now that I see, and I was born on the south side in the Phillips neighborhood at Mount Sinai Hospital, and it makes kind of sense about my own health and what has happened and where these locations are. And I want to know if there are monitors there that could be added more so to a more detail and finding permission of exceeding what's going on with this air, because I'm very curious about how these elements are traveling through the air that are affecting our community and our soils, because it connects to our soils, and we as humans walk and we kick the dust and we continue to inhale and breathe it. And I just curious about that. Thank you. And I'm sorry, I can ramble on about it. Thank you.
Right, Karen.
Well, it's very inspiring to hear the level of concern and just smart comments. Thank you, Leslie, for those particular last ones, and also Devon. Let me just say two things. If we want to try to look at the cost that's required to do air permits, one of the things that needs to be considered is the cost to the human being's health. It shouldn't just be the cost of the state agency or city or county's cost to do a permit. It's like, how does that compare then to the cost of the damage to the people who are there? So for example, you think Cassie's son who had open heart surgery, what did that cost? So that's just one person. And so I'm just thinking, the cost to the permit must be also include a comparison to the human cost, whatever it is. So that's one thing. The other thing I wanted to say is that air monitors are not all equal. Some of the kind of air monitors that we fought to get, for example, in South Minneapolis and in East Phillips in particular, there's some that are measuring, particulates that that need to be measured, but they're not the ones that are the tiniest ones that go right into the lungs and into the bloodstream, the nanoparticulates. And that costs money. I can tell you from trying to get some of those monitors paid for just in the East Phillips area, you have to pass a law. They required us to then put some money into the MPCA to pay for some of those monitors. It's worth it, and it's really important because low-level monitors don't really tell you the story of the burden on the people. So I just wanted to mention those two things, that when we go forward with these actions, that we kind of have our eyes open to that. And I guess the last thing is, who's opposing it? Someone asked. I can tell you that our own city of Minneapolis opposed us trying to get permits updated, and actually probably leading to some limitations on the two major polluters in East Phillips, the Smith Foundry and the bituminous roadways asphalt plant. They came and they lobbied against a bill that would have said the city has to take responsibility. They can't be protected by an old state law that said, oh, you can't, these folks are grandfathered in and they can't be removed. So I just, we can find out who's opposing it, and it's kind of very discouraging sometimes, but it can be changed because the people making those decisions are elected.
I'll just hop in and say, first of all, thanks seriously to everyone for these awesome questions and comments. Addressing Leslie's question about locations, we do have a list of locations of the facilities that if you wanted to move forward with an air monitoring project or anything else and needed those, we could get those to you.
Thank you. And to piggyback off what Karen said, I do know about those air monitors. I had the pleasure of working at the pollution control, and I explored the whole building. I know where they're located. I know who goes in and checks them out and repair them and everything. It's fascinating. So that being said, the city and the county, I believe, have a proposal going about going green. And I think this is a good opportunity to address these issues and attach it to this proposal about this climate change proposal and everything they're doing, because without the monitoring of the air and how it's affecting us, I don't think they see the bigger picture, and that's the science geek in me. And I'm thinking that this could be a change in the way the permit is. And I know the permit has to be done at the pollution control, but they're constantly changing permits and constantly gathering meetings and how to make better changes in our state for all the natural sciences that we have. And as far as the non-permitting and going backwards, I feel the pollution control needs to have that discussion and make aware of the changes to these companies and do more enforcement, even though we only have a few people that regulate it, but do more enforcement. And we, as a green zone, should, no offense to you people at the pollution control, ride you like a rodeo to make these changes in your permitting, and call out these polluters that are killing us, because we're the residents that live here and who is being affected in our future. So I'm done, because like I said, I can ramble on, but I am interested in them locations.
Well, it sounds like there are some concrete next steps. So I can follow up with Fox and Julia offline, connect those individuals who need to be connected, and then gather maybe some additional maps with, I think it might also be helpful to look at not just the non-expiring permits, but also just other air permits. And we do have that information as well. And if we can get, and I know that there's also locations of the monitors. And so just to have an overall picture. It might also be interesting to see a timeline for those permits that aren't non-expiring, that do have expirations, of any upcoming expirations, especially if they're in the green zones, but maybe even just perhaps statewide. And then I can also follow up with our intergovernmental relations staff and see if they have been working with any greater Minnesota organizations or community partners who are interested in this. I know that there are some organizations that work within the Twin Cities that do have a statewide focus and have interest in health or environment. So those are potential allies too. So maybe we could do some, at a future meeting, we could do some power mapping and on who we know and who we know knows other people.
I think we
I thought you
might
said
have
power
go ahead,
and
Jack.
napping.
Oh.
I was like, I'm down to power nap on Teams.
Sorry, Andrew, what were you saying? And then Devon, you have your hand up again.
Yeah, and this might be for the next discussion here, but just curious if there's a way for our support to be thrown behind, I guess, the state the current what am I trying to say? Whatever's currently in play.
Yeah.
I mean, just to give it any support we can.
Yeah, and this is where like the balance between being an advisory body to the city and then being individuals gets a little, we have to kind of draw those clear lines. So as individuals, you are able to contact your representatives and advocate for anything at the legislature or elsewhere. As an advisory body to the city council, what you can do is tell the city council you want this to be on its legislative priorities. It actually is this year. And that was mostly due to the fact that the green zones raised this as an issue in past years as well. So this is on the radar of our intergovernmental relations team. They are aware, they are tracking what is happening with the bills that FULI has introduced, and in any way that they're able to support them, they are trying to do so. The challenge is right now there's just not a lot of reception at the legislature for these kinds of bills that increase regulatory authority, could potentially cost more money to both public agencies and private companies. And when Minneapolis wants something, that is often a signal to that this legislature might do the exact opposite. So, yeah. Devon, sorry, go ahead.
Sure, thank you. Wow, I just got to keep saying wow. I'm not the only one thinking about these things, so it's really inspiring. I'm with that being said, I'm really curious about how we're sharing about the work of the green zones, because I'm tapped into environmental justice, like I'm paying attention to these things, but I think there is, and I know that there's some limitations with being a body, as a part of all the bureaucracy that comes with being a commission within the city. But I feel like there's a broader campaign, and I use that word campaign loosely. And it's really about, sometimes we talk about storytelling or whatever framing we want to use, but I think the broader community throughout the city of Minneapolis needs to know what's happening within these two bodies, and that, that there's data to support what we know. We have, we know what the health implications are. We can talk about the social determinants of health until we're blue in the face. But to know that there's someone actually planning and strategizing and with tactics and actions to address it at whatever level we feel like we can address it at, whether that's at the with changing laws and enforcement, or, having a direct target of getting the Smith Foundry or GAF out or whatever that is. So I know that I know that there's some limitations as far as, getting citywide communications to really tell this story in a way that is really resonates with the people who are most heavily impacted by it. But I just want to put that, I'm sure it's probably already on your radar, and I apologize, I'm not at every meeting, but I would like to see more of that. I would like to see more of it coming across my social media, and, some of that more proactive, because oftentimes we're reacting to something, right? We're responding to a negative media story, or we're responding to some pollutant that got spilled, or, so how do we flip that on its head and say that you actually have citizens in your city who are working on these issues pretty much daily? Thank you.
Devon, I don't think you could have more perfectly teed up the next agenda item. So I'm going to actually hand it over to Jackie to kick us off.
Yeah, I was gonna say, you really can't ask for a better segue than that. So the next part that was supposed to start at 6 p.m. So I'm assuming we're gonna expedite the breakout rooms a little bit. We were gonna talk about kind of getting the word out there because Andrew in particular brought this up that he's been living in the Northside Green Zone for however many years and didn't find out about the Northside Green Zone Task Force until recently. And same thing with me too. So the next part of our meeting that we really wanted to focus on with the whole group was to kind of how do we bring the Northside Green Zone work into the communities and not just kept inside the task forces. So we're going to go into breakout rooms. Kelly's going to take care of that. And we're just going to be brainstorming. So some things that have been brought up, at least in the Northside meetings, is like an environmental justice summit. Yes, and then zines, podcasts, all that stuff. But the summit in particular was just bringing all of these groups, either that work for the city or that are just these grassroots orgs together to talk about what they're doing, the challenges they're facing, the successes they've been able to achieve, all that stuff. So I'll let Kelly send us out into breakout rooms.
Yep, and just quick reminders. Actually, I need to work on these rooms for a second, but you will have a facilitator in each of your rooms, but make sure that you have someone who's taking notes. I'm going to drop into the chat a link to a Google Doc where you can take notes so we can collect all of your ideas. And then we may not have time for much of a group report out at the end, but if you can then have someone who's ready to maybe suggest like one idea that your group really resonated with when we come back. So I'm going to have to, I forgot I was assigning people, so I need to make sure that there is distribution. Bear with me while we do this. Oops. Are there any questions that folks have while I'm looking through this?
I have a quick question.
I do. Who got Thanksgiving leftovers? I'm hungry.
Thanksgiving? Hopefully you mean Easter.
I mean Easter.
Yeah, that's me.
Yes,
I don't
the
want
day
any of
of
those.
thanks.
I don't want any of that old stuff.
Hey, I worked overnight. I thought today was Thursday and missed the whole meeting.
Good. Just curious, do we have a Facebook group? I'm not that active on Facebook, but is there just, I mean, do we have one?
I was actually just searching for that. Don't even bother getting on Facebook.
Yeah, I'm not going to volunteer to run it, but was curious if there was something that already exists.
Are you
I always end up in jail. Thank you.
Are you asking about like a green zone Facebook
Yeah.
specifically? So from what I've understood from conversations is that we're not allowed to have our own social media page because that would be
why? What's this about?
Lee, we can hear you.
Which I don't think that is allowed because that's something I've definitely brought up too because social media is an amazing way to connect with people, but unfortunately, yeah, I don't think we can have our own page, but maybe there are ways that we can still make social media friendly content and stuff like that.
Yes, great question, great answer. I've kindly got the rooms assigned. So off you go. You'll have about 20 minutes and I'll try to do better with the warnings. All right, Georgianne, are you still there? Or is Alan, is that you who's on the phone?
I don't know which room I'm supposed to be in.
Oh, yeah. So Georgianne, for whatever reason, Microsoft Teams doesn't allow us to, it doesn't have the ability to put people who are on the phone in different rooms. So you get to hang out with me.
Oh,
and it looks
okay.
like Marquita's in the main room with us too.
Okay.
So we can have a little breakout group of our own.
Okay. You know, I really thought it was, why don't we, as the Green Zone, have our own Facebook page? Kelly?
Yeah, so as Samara was explaining, there is like one city official Facebook page, and boards and commissions aren't able to have their own official ones. So
we just have to use LIMS?
Well, yeah, so for any official communication, it would go through LIMS, or like in terms, like we could create a newsletter that goes out through Gov Delivery as the service. So like I currently send out the email announcement, or like the meeting announcements and the agendas and other things through Gov Delivery. And we have, I think for each Green Zone, there's over 300 subscribers. So messages can go out that way. I only send them out maybe about once, maybe twice a month at the most. And then we can, if there is some sort of messaging, like an event that the city is sponsoring, the Green Zones have worked on, we can put that out on the city's Facebook page. We just have to have like a specific thing to share. A couple boards and commissions have kind of gotten around this by like an individual member themselves will create like a Facebook page that's sort of like friends of like, and so I think there's like a friends of the Food Council, and there might be a friends of the Community Environmental Advisory Commission, but those are not city. They're not formally recognized by the city. They're not official. They don't go through city communications. It would be like just any private individual creating a Facebook account, and so individually or privately members can join that. Yeah, so we are kind of limited when it comes to social media as an official body, but everyone is connected through their networks, through as individuals to Facebook. I know, for example, Roxanne has a Facebook page that's all about environmental justice, and I don't know if she still has.
I have seen Roxanne on Facebook.
Yep. So I know not even posting her as herself, but posting through as an environmental justice Facebook group. She was able to get a lot of messages out. I remember she was posting multiple things a day through that, and I think now she does it more on her own personal page. That page might have gotten closed for some reason. So I think there are ways to use social media. We just have to be careful and aware of like what is kind of official city communications and what is just, private individuals sharing information with each other in the broader community.
I just want you to know that I really listened closely to what Karen Clark had to say. She has been doing this work for so long.
Yep. Yeah, and we've been really honored to have her participate in the Green Zone's creation really from the start. She was on the citywide working group starting in 2016, was on the Southside task force, and has continued on to the Southside Council. So she's been involved for 5 years now, specifically on this work, even while she was still a representative at the state.
Right. And so she is retired from the legislature, but she continues to do this work.
Yep. So what are other ideas or thoughts that you have about awareness building, or
Well,
what are other
you
ways
know,
we can bring more people into these meetings, or just share information with them?
Well, I suppose if you're going to talk about engagement, then you have to talk about, and if you want it on a grassroots level, then you have to talk about neighborhood organizations. How do we get the messages to the neighborhood organizations?
Mm-hmm.
But what really bothers me is the city of Minneapolis doesn't want to take responsibility for what is happening. And in my neighborhood in Hawthorne, they use the air monitors to monitor from Northern Meadows and GAF at River Point townhouses. And they personally, some of the residents there personally monitored them, I don't know, a month or 6 weeks. And I don't know if they were the real low-level monitors or what. Can't not remember. So those monitors do work.
Yeah, so maybe
they do
connecting
work
with those residents.
Yeah. I can connect with them and ask them about those monitors they used. Because they're just really close to the river and to GAF and Northern Meadows. And it's really a lot of the river that we want to protect too. Because that's where our drinking water comes from.
Yep.
I don't think anybody brought that up.
No, and that wasn't the subject for today's meeting, but we have
Right.
For our next Northside meeting, I've had both the Park Board and the Mississippi Watershed Management Organization ask to have time on our agenda. And the Mississippi Watershed Management Organization specifically wants to talk about this like green infrastructure and blue infrastructure that's all about quality of the stormwater and our surface waters. That gets to, I think, the points that you're making.
Well, if we have MWMO, they are so education orientated and right on the river that would be a good partner for us to have.
Yep. Yeah. So that's who has asked to have some time at the next meeting.
So you said MWMO, and who was the other one?
The Park Board.
Oh yes, the Park Board. Who would be coming from the Park Board?
Kate Lamers, specifically to talk about the Upper Harbor Terminal work.
Yes, and not okay, because I brought that up, but not for the Green Zone meeting tonight. I brought it up in another meeting. And I have a sign in my yard that let's get a better Upper Harbor Terminal. This is a really volatile issue, and I sit on the CAC for the Park Board on this issue. So are you going to have anybody from the city come? Are we going to have a kind of like a balance thing, or just the Park Board?
Not sure. So when the Northside Green Zone, when you all signed on or approved the letter for comments on Upper Harbor Terminal, the last Northside Green Zone meeting, that went to City Council and staff. And so there is a request out to Hillary Holmes as well as Hillary Dvorak, both in CPED, to ask if either they want to come to our May Northside Green Zone meeting or have a separate meeting with the Northside Green Zone. So it may all be combined in one meeting. It may all be combined in one meeting, but I'm not sure yet.
Because former Representative Joe Mallory has been working on this issue, and he brought to my attention the East Phillips study, but he has a lot of knowledge about the laws and what went over at the legislature, and he has been working on this issue, trying to get comments that the health department has made and studies that they've made, the Minneapolis Health Department. So if you need somebody else on the agenda, I would suggest Joe Mallory.
And he would specifically talk to the Upper Harbor Terminal work?
He could talk to the Upper Harbor Terminal because he lives in Camden.
Okay, but that's what you're suggesting, that he could come talk about or at least attend that meeting?
I'm suggesting, yeah, you could have a telephone conversation, or I can give him a heads up. But Kelly, if you want to call him and talk to him and see if he can fit into what your idea for the next meeting is, okay, that's up to you.
Okay. Yeah, if you could connect us, that would be great. I don't know. I don't have his contact information.
Okay, I will, and then I will give him yours and ask him to call you.
Okay.
So, is this meeting supposed to be over at 7?
Yes. Yeah. So I'll be giving folks probably a 2-minute warning in a few minutes, a 1-minute warning, hopefully, and then a 10-second warning. And then we'll do a quick share out of some of the high-level ideas that they discussed.
Okay.
Yeah, so to your first point about the neighborhood organizations, I'd kind of like to talk that through with you a little bit. So over the years, I've tried to include neighborhood organizations, both in like reaching out to them one-on-one and seeing how what they're working on is related to or not to the green zones, or kind of leveraging their social media or newsletters or things like that to get messages out. But it's generally to a limited extent.
Yeah, it is really hard to work with them because I also sit with AFCAC, and we have a terrible time getting them involved. But I'm sure somebody from AFCAC, you could talk to somebody there. Alexis Penny, Mary McGuire, any of those people. And Joseph's on AFCAC too.
Okay. Hey, Cassandra.
Hello.
Welcome to the last 10 minutes of the Green Zone meeting.
Thank you.
We are in breakouts right now. And so we have Georgiana on the phone. And since, for whatever reason, Teams doesn't let you assign people who are calling in to breakout rooms, we're having a breakout room here. So you've joined our breakout room, and the conversation is around community engagement and awareness building of the green zones. So we've been talking about like neighborhood organizations, other advisory bodies, like Above the Falls and Upper Harbor Terminal advisory committees, and then individuals who would be good to connect with. But if you have thoughts on how we can increase awareness of the green zones work more broadly with community members or other partners, be interested.
One thing that first comes to my mind is, I know like during last summer in the uprisings, we had several like block groups would form text chains or email chains. I'm guessing that most of those aren't widely known unless you're in them. But if there's a way, like even Green Zones members, if they're a part of those, to not forget about them.
Mm-hmm.
I know recently some of my neighbors sent around the comment period notice for the East Phillips urban farm project.
Okay.
And the EAW. And I was like, oh yeah, I should have thought of that to also send through here.
That was a big discussion that we had at AFCAC around that issue.
AFCAC discussed the East Phillips Indoor Urban Farm.
No, not, but the EA and the environmental, what do those initials stand for?
Yeah.
And then the AUR.
Yeah.
And which is the better way to do the an assessment? Which way did it go?
Were you actually able to weigh in on which environmental review that staff chose, or you were going to make recommendations?
Kelly, along with Friends of Mississippi River and Colleen Toberman, we did send a letter to the city.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
I can't remember. Has the group that you're a part of, Kelly, have you used targeted social media posts before, like the paid tweets and Facebook posts and stuff like that?
I think we have. I think we've used them for promoting like free home energy squad visits and other like financial incentives or like time limited programs. I know that that other departments use them. So that's an idea of, we were talking before about like the limited capabilities of the city's social media. But I always forget that there is a way to do targeting. I don't know how that works, but as long as somebody else does.
Yeah. Yeah, I feel like I see, based on like where I am or where my phone says I am, I'll see different targeted ads or targeted posts.
Yep. Yeah. We just have to think of like, what would be the message we were sharing? What did we want people to know? And then make sure that that is acceptable to the city communications and that there isn't some other like big thing. I think that's the other thing, because there's one city Facebook page. Like if there's a message that the city wants to get out, that's really important. It can cause like a lot of messaging to not get any airtime because they don't want to flood too much content.
Right. Gotcha. Kelly, I can give you Joe Mullery's email.
Okay. Yeah, do you have it right now?
Yep. Joe Mullery. So it's JOEM, as in Mary, ULLERY @gmail.com.
Okay, great. Well, I will say that you connected us. Reach out to him. And then just as a heads up, I'm closing the breakout rooms, so everybody's going to be coming back.
And I can give you his phone number, 612-521-4921.
Thank you.
Now that's his home number, so he does have a cell, but I didn't have that handy.
It's fine. All right, we've got everybody coming back. Which group wants to share first?
I can share my group.
Go for it.
Really quickly. So one thing that we were talking about, hold on, I'm gonna mute Lene once I get the participants up. Although there is something soothing about hearing a baby cry and not having to do anything about it. But anyway, one thing that we talked about is kind of having like an alternative 311 social media type thing, or just something where people can be like, I drove my kid to school today and there was this many diesel trucks idling on the side of the road, and when I got home they were still there. Stuff like that. So just something where people, not just us, can post about things that they're noticing in their neighborhood, in their daily life, related to these environmental justice concerns. But I'll leave it at that. We got one more minute if anyone else wants to share.
No.
Sorry. I am ending meeting.
We got 1 second here to take ours. So one thing we discussed in previous conversations, and I think is maybe good going forward, is Lene is going to be able to get us a pricing list on what running a potential ad would look like in small local newspapers, the neighborhood newspapers that go to everyone's doorstep, and maybe trying to stay away from a kind of a political statement, but more of an informational, here's who we are, here's how to get in touch with us, and trying to staying away from the pushback that has been brought before when kind of putting our weight behind something, more so just saying here's where we are, here's how you can get involved, and maybe having those conversations more offline than out front.
I can go really quick. Our group talked about a lot of random things, but I'm looking at my notes right now, and I think we just have like a solid list of a lot of different places who we could, also like partner with, and who could maybe spread the word about us without like, us being the ones to make a social media site or whatever. Things even like environmental clubs at high schools or different places like that. So.
Awesome. Well, thanks everyone. Hopefully that was fun, and we'll only get better at this technology thing, I promise. So if those who took notes can make sure to send those to me or to Julia, that would be great, so we can capture those and we'll put them all together. And I think this is a conversation we definitely need to come back to, so stay tuned for next steps. Hope you all have a wonderful evening.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Thank you.
You go, Bobbleman.